All right, well, let's get started. Just 1 second. On the wrong day. So welcome to the Clackamas Water Environmental Services Budget Committee. And the first thing we need to do is we need the committee members to introduce themselves.
Michael Morrow.
Ron Weigel.
Christopher Bowker.
Russ Axelrod.
Well, that's 4 of the 5, and so we'll get started. The committee members need to nominate someone, and someone needs to second that to elect a chair. After we go through the budget and there is a motion and a second to acknowledge or accept the budget, then we will poll you. Brenda will poll you. So with that, please nominate a chair.
I nominate Ron Weigel.
Second.
Any further nominations? All right, well, all those in favor of Ron Weigel, vote, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Ron, your check is in the mail, and go ahead, and it's your gavel.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Bernard. I'd like to ask for nominations for secretary at this point. Do I hear it?
Nominate Christopher Bowker.
I'll second that.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that Christopher
Bowker.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
should be elected secretary. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hey,
Opposed? Hearing none, the ayes or yes have it, and the motion has been approved. Greg, could you present to the the budget message at this point?
Sure, absolutely. A quick piece of business. Dylan, can you please let in Lynn Chicoine for Wes?
Yes, of course. She should be coming over now.
All right, and can folks see my screen okay?
yep.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Bernard and Budget Committee members. My name is Greg Geist. I'm the Director of Water Environment Services, and I'm pleased to present our fiscal 2021 budget today. Let's see if I can. I won't read through these. As part of your packet, our mission and our vision. And just the broadest of overviews, we have a $166 million budget this year. The one thing I wanted to call out on this slide is you'll see the beginning fund balances of 102.5 million and in contingencies. And actually those numbers are going to change a little bit, but we essentially are burning down some of our reserves in our construction fund because of all of the construction that we've got going.
Can I interrupt for just a moment? I got a note that William Gifford is in the waiting room hoping to be promoted in.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And you also see a $40 million capital outlay, and we'll talk more about that. So as far as the major themes when it comes to revenues, we're projecting an overall reduction of about 2.6 million. Before the coronavirus pandemic hit, we actually took a pretty hard look at our revenues, and Chris, and a combination of Chris and Doug, noticed that our projections for the amount of SDCs that we're going to be capturing has been consistently high. In years past, we based those projections on the population forecasts that we've done the last few years through Portland State University or Eco Northwest, and we're just seeing consistently that those numbers weren't playing out on an annual basis, although they're probably good for long term. So we went ahead and adjusted that assumption down. which given the subsequent events was a good move on our part. We're also projecting some decrease in retail service charges due to this. I'll talk more about that later, but we are part of our response to this is that we're being very open to payment plans, and we are not going to certify past due payments to property taxes this year. So we projected what that might look like, and that was a hit from our revenues. I will say so far we've already had a couple billing cycles under our belt now with these new conditions, and we're not seeing a material difference in our residential collection rate. So that's good. And there was actually kind of a happy accident when we sent out letters explaining to our customers that we were going to take these kind of liberal actions in response to their financial stress. We actually got really positive feedback, and people that may have otherwise been in the certification program have been paying their bills. So lesson learned there, that some well-timed and supportive letters can actually increase our revenue. Okay, on expenditures, overall we have a reduction of about 3.6 million from last year. We actually had a slight decrease in our operating budget, and believe it or not, we have a little bit less in capital spending budgeted for this coming year than we did this past year. We'll be finishing up our Kellogg project and wrapping up, well, our Kellogg project will be finished this summer, and we'll be wrapping up the major solids handling project at Tri-City. But then we've got other big construction projects that are going to be kicking off this year, which I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Greg, can you hold for a second? This is Gary Schmidt. We just want to confirm, William Gifford, are you with the Oregon City Business Alliance? Is that his moniker, so we can bring him in the room?
I believe it is.
Okay. Dylan, go ahead, please. Sorry, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, and so I mentioned our proposed operating budget of 30.1 million. That's a 0.2% decrease from last year. That's pretty much materials and services, and a slight increase in labor given the PERS situation and that. However, we are not proposing any new positions moving forward this year, so that's why that's staying nice and flat. When we look at our performance Clackamas, our 4 lines of business: operations, environmental services, capital planning, and business services, you'll see the bulk of our operating budget is in operations, and which is where it should be. And again, you see that split between personnel services and materials and services. Wes is different than many of the departments in the county in that we're pretty evenly split. We do spend a fair amount of our budget on people, but we also buy a lot of stuff: electricity, chemicals, parts, things like that. So we're a little more balanced than many of the other departments. Just some highlights from our performance Clackamas. Overall, we're at 73%, meeting or exceeding our strategic targets, and that's an improvement from 18-19. So we're happy about that. It's not perfect, but we have some stretch goals in there, and I think that's good to have. So we're not just counting what's easy. We're trying to stretch and improve all the time. A couple examples right now are maintenance activities. We wanted to move those from being reactionary to being planned and do more preventative maintenance. And we have been hitting that target, which is good. However, when we talk about our collection system and our ability to go out and inspect and clean and those hundreds of miles of pipe, we set a pretty ambitious target of 16.7% of those per year, and we are down on that one for this year. And frankly, it remains to be seen whether we can catch up on that or not. We have not, because of the changes that we made with our staffing and our schedules. It makes it much more difficult to get crews out doing that type of work, and so we've been de-emphasizing that up until now. That may change later in the summer depending on how things go with the Our capital budget I mentioned is 40 million for this coming year, and that's about 38 million in sanitary sewer and 2 in surface water capital. Some of the big projects, the Clackamas Interceptor Capacity Project, that's out in the industrial area. We're still spending a little over $9 million at the Tri-City to finish up the solids handling project. And then we're kicking off the Tri-City Outfall project. In surface water, we have a very expensive and kind of unplanned detention pipe collapse in Happy Valley. So that ate up a pretty good chunk of our construction. I will say in surface water, we're also planning and recently secured SRF funding for a pretty significant project in the Three Creeks area, right near between Costco and Clackamas Community College and the Aquatic Center there. We have a pretty good chunk of property, and it's a real opportunity to have another Carly type flagship surface water project. So we're embarking on that planning this year. I mentioned the reserves, 14 million, going from 103 to approximately 89 million. And that is balancing that SRF money that we're using for the solids handling project and paying for additional construction projects with cash. Still very healthy reserves. You know, I don't want to read this. I'm going to skip this one. So when we look at, we mentioned in the budget message that we're doing 5% budget rate increases. And then later on in the budget message, it's more nuanced than that. And we have had some questions about that. So, and Chris and Doug, feel free to chime in anytime. I'm going to call your attention to the fourth row from the bottom, percent change from FY 19-20. So if you go across that column, you'll see that yes, many of our ratepayers will be experiencing a 5% rate increase. Some, however, because of the work that Chris and Doug did, we realized that we were over collecting on our debt service for rate zone 2. We need a certain coverage for that, a certain percentage, and we had collected a little bit more than we needed to, being conservative. And so we went ahead and backed off on that and baked that back into the rate for those folks. So the effective rate change for those folks that have been paying the debt service on the membrane bioreactor looks like between 1.7 and 0.13%. If you average those all out across, it's about 2.5% district-wide. And then we always like to show the forecast. We have been doing master planning. We're continuing to do master planning for our surface water and our facilities, and build a capital program that heavily influences our rates on that, and do it in a way that prevents rate shock. We've got strong guidance from our advisory committee that they want stable, at minimum inflationary rate adjustments, and no more than 10% in any given year, which is quite a lot. So we want to make sure that we are looking out far enough and projecting and planning and managing our cash and our borrowing to achieve those goals. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. System development charges, per the advice of our advisory committee, we are taking a inflationary adjustment this year, about 2%. So those are proposed as $8,000 for sanitary sewer and $215 for surface water. As far as emerging issues go, you know, I'm sure you've heard this message a lot. You know, we're not sure what tomorrow brings in some ways. I think we're doing some good planning. We made some good conservative assumptions about revenues, and we have strong reserves. So nothing too exciting is going to happen, but we're also kind of taking a wait and see and what maybe the long-term impact of this economic downturn could be for our revenues and consequently our capital improvement plan. We're hearing positive things. Like I said, people are paying their bills at this point, and we haven't heard from any of our major industrial customers that they are either unable to pay their bill or closing down or anything like that. I mentioned earlier that we set up, a policy of not doing the certification to the tax roll, and very generous and flexible repayment plans, and also no late fees during this time, which again was pretty well received. So next ups, we have the public hearing and testimony, Q&A, and hopefully a motion to approve. And then this, obviously, our final budget will be adopted by the board at the end of June.
Thanks, Greg.
The chair, we have Commissioner Humberston and Commissioner Savas, both with their hands raised.
All right.
Thank you. So just some comments and one question. I appreciate there on page 3 where you described the 5% rate increases and then your efforts to ameliorate that down to on an average about 2.5%. Given what's going on in the economy, appreciate those efforts very much. Although it does not impact me personally because I'm on a septic tank, I'm not unawares of the cost of sewer services and appreciate that you kept those rate increases under control. I just want to reiterate something we talked about last year. I really appreciated your refinancing of your debt and the savings that came from that. And then I did have 2 questions. On page 16, I want to make sure I understood this correctly. You have staff that were needed to support construction of the new facility, and some of whom you were going to keep. Do I assume correctly you're going to keep those as part of the operations of the new facility and you needed to increase staffing for that purpose?
Yeah, well, last year we added a couple operations staff positions in order to operate all the new equipment that we are building. This year, we are not proposing to add additional positions. However, we are having discussions when we build a project at the Kellogg facility in 2 or 3 years, we won't need as many truck drivers, for example. And so we're talking about how can we repurpose those positions or retrain those people in some cases to pick up those tasks.
Okay, and then my last question is actually directly a finance question. On page 65, you show city right-of-way fees as an income. My understanding is that's a pass-through to the cities, but what I couldn't find was where it passes through as an expense. Could you tell me where that is? That was $647,000 in city right-of-way fees.
Doug, I'm going to pitch that one to you. And if you need a lifeline, you can call Aaron.
Offhand, I'm not sure which line item it's in. It's in the budget. It's under expenses, but I forget where which line item it's under. I can check real quick.
But I'm looking on 65 under resources where it says city right-of-way fees. But under under requirements, it doesn't show it going out, and I'm wondering where you account for it. That's all.
Well, it's a part of on page 64. It's part of interagency coordination. It would be in that line item. Which is about 2/3 of the way down the page on page 64.
Got it. So it actually is included under there?
Yes, yes, it is.
Oh, okay. It's just, I didn't see that you accounted for it as an income separately, but you didn't account for it as an outgo separately, so I couldn't find it.
Yeah, it is strictly a pass-through as far as Wes is concerned.
Understood. Thank you. That's all I had.
Sure.
Greg, in your PowerPoint slide, I believe it was number 9, slide 9, you had where you showed the capital projects almost totaling about 40 million, and 37 or 38.5 of that was sewer related. And then you listed 3 examples in that slide. And one was 9.4 million, the other one was 9.1 million, and the latter one was $1 million. Well, that adds up to 19.5. So I'm curious what the other 19 million is.
And I will have Lynn go through. We just wanted to highlight a few here, but yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Lynn.
We've got, it's in the capital plan, if you have a copy of that yet. We've got 20 some projects, Commissioner. So there are quite a few. Those are the bigger of the projects.
Okay. So you just highlighted out the largest ones then. Okay. So my other question is on SDCs. I did not participate in that SDC discussion you had with the advisory board. Was there discussion? I know that's something we've been talking about with regards to having a lower rate for smaller homes and then a tiered rate for maybe 4, 5, or 6 bedroom homes or larger. Did that conversation ensue in any detail?
Yes, we did take that concept to the advisory committee. Gosh, I'm trying to think of when. Ron may want to chime in as to when we did that. It may have been November. March. Okay. So not that long ago. And we did get support for kind of a 5-tiered residential SDC approach, depending on square footage.
But I don't think that was, we did have the discussion, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was thinking that was going to take into effect the following year, not this coming year, because there was some discussion about whether it was going to be a 3-tier or a 5-tier. And so there were individual nuances that could relate to that request, all of which had merit. There was no question that there was a consensus among the committee that there should be some type of prorated or recommending for some type of proration. It was just not finalized on what that proration would be.
Okay, so when you mentioned, Ron, that would be next year, is that next year 2021? Or 2021, or is that for the budget year of 2021, 2022?
I'm going to talk out of school here, possibly. I don't believe it's for this coming budget year, but Chris or Greg, I'm sure could follow that.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you meant calendar or not. Thank you for at least clarifying what you thought. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was just going to say, we will have an opportunity. So what we were trying to do is get input on some of the policy issues that we're working on related to our rules and standards, which has been over a year-long process. We're looking at later this summer, probably fall, to wrap that up. And all of these issues will be coming back both at some level to the advisory committee and to the board as to how those rules and regulations are adopted and when things go into effect.
Yeah, I got one more question on SDCs, but I just thought I would just clarify that for people who don't know about the tiered rates and the purpose. As we know, the Portland metro region has very high, the cost of housing, period, the cost of living is just going up tremendously. And so the SDCs are part of every new home built. It's a one-time charge. And the idea was that, or the concept basically is that a person's built a modest 1 or 2 bedroom home, should they pay the same system development charge as a person who's building a 6-bedroom home? And I think logically, a lot of people would intuitively think that it ought to be, that's not really a fair assessment. You know, the more bathrooms you have, the more you're using the sewer system. So I just wanted to just put that out there for people that may not be aware what that is. My last question with regard to SDCs, Greg, is what is earlier on you spoke about your SDC fees or your income was higher than anticipated, and I'm not sure that's what you meant, but I'm really wondering what our recovery rate is. Our SDCs are designed to have growth pay for growth, and all these capital projects we're doing that add capacity that are eligible for SDC funds. I'm just curious as to what percentage of recovery of those SDCs goes into those capital projects that increase capacity.
Sure, and if I misspoke earlier, I apologize. What I was saying is we were projecting a decrease in revenues, and part of that was the conservative assumptions we made regarding the amount of SDCs we would be collecting, because what we had projected in years past was optimistic. And so we put those revenue projections down based on what we've actually seen coming in the door due to new development. And of the $8,000 that we collect for an SDC, if we were charging the maximum SDC, this statutory maximum, based on our 5-year capital improvement plan, it was, I believe, around $13,000. Both Doug or Chris can correct me. So that difference is what growth isn't paying for growth, I guess. When we spent a fair amount of time actually, and we have people on this budget committee that were on both sides of this issue, Christopher, as far as whether that balance between growth truly paying for growth and then having the ratepayer pick up some of that burden. And so we showed, and I wish I had the graph now, but we essentially showed what that difference looks like from a rate standpoint. And again, Chris or Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we were talking about maybe $1.50 per month out maybe 5 to 8 years. Is that
right,
Chris?
Yeah, I appreciate you that. And I think that's really the core, the crux of it all is that for what we don't collect in SDC fees for that growth component is just borne by the ratepayers, the rate base. And I think that's kind of the balancing point. And I know there's economies of scale that could argue it both ways. But we have such a significant capital cost in the horizon. And maybe that's why I won't say an anomaly, but we're making probably per capita, probably a lot more capital investment in our sewer system than maybe a lot of other jurisdictions.
Yes, and when you look regionally, we have one of the highest sewer SDC rates as well already. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And to be fair, and make sure we're reporting out on what the advisory committee decided, their recommendation was an inflation adjustment for this year and next year with a revisit of that conversation regularly so we can check in and see about what impact that was having and if we were appropriately balancing the challenges of having housing that's affordable, competitive SDCs, and not overburdening the ratepayers. Those policies are intention, and they wanted to have a continued robust dialogue around them.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because the cost of living and the cost of housing, they're I won't say they're exactly the same thing, but if you're passing it on to every household that's existing, that's just another added cost per month per household that is just exacerbated by all the increases. That's the concern, is how we keep our cost of living as reasonable as possible.
For the sake of accuracy, I'll just point out that 44% of our capital expenditures by dollars is capacity related. Little over half is condition related.
Thank you.
We have Mayor Axelrod and then Mr. Bowker. Mayor, you're on mute.
Yeah, I got that. Thank you. I just wanted to pass along, it's a great point, Commissioner Savas, and I just wanted to assure you that on the advisory committee, we had a very robust discussion around equity and how we approach equity. And it was a very equitable discussion, I guess, about equity. And I just wanted to give you that assurance that there's a lot of sensitivity to that in trying to find out, what is the best approach? How do we best balance it? And I think it's going very well. In the right direction, I'll say.
I'll just second everything that both Mayor Axelrod and Greg have said. I think this is probably one of the more interesting topics of conversation that we've had. I think it went on probably for maybe 6 months or so, getting revisited. People were very impassioned on both sides, growth paying for growth, but then also a concern that we might slow development, especially in communities where rates are already being adjusted. And I think what we really did is we took everyone's concerns into consideration, and I feel like we've met a nice compromise. And so for now, we're going to start out slow and really just pace with inflation, so we don't actually go backwards at all. And then in a couple of years, I think we said in two years out, then we'll start to slowly ramp up those rates so that growth starts paying more for growth. And I think that we even, this was, when we made this recommendation in March, we even set aside a point to maybe revisit this depending on how COVID-19 plays out, because the effects of that aren't entirely known. So we don't want to be too scripted with how we recommend these SDC changes. So.
Right. And I just want to acknowledge that we've got a great, many of you are on that committee. I just want to say we got a great group of people that are on that advisory committee, and a lot of good minds. Just want to say, just give my appreciation for your thoughtfulness on this topic. So thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other comments from the committee members? Michael or William?
The Mayor Axelrod has his hand raised.
Oh, there we go. Russ?
Well, I was going to just mention, principally for the benefit of the commissioners, since they haven't, unless you've been watching all our advisory committee discussions and then our committee, budget committee discussions, we had identified several sort of clarifying items in the budget that we're hoping to go to get sorted out but when the budget is finalized, I think in a couple of weeks by the commission. Those were largely considered, administrative in nature, not really substantive relative to the budget, but helping with clarity around the presentation, particularly in some of the introductory materials and information. So I believe staff is going to be, is working on sort of a list of those things, and we'll be seeing those in the next version is our understanding.
Yes.
Staff can correct me if I got that wrong, but I think that's our objective there.
That's correct. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to commend Greg Geist and his team for their outreach to the community and the groups that they have put together for input from the community and how they're working effectively with the community. A couple of years ago, it wasn't that way. I really want to acknowledge the effort that's been put in to do that. And also the volunteers that have agreed to serve and work on this from the community. I think it's made for a healthier organization. I just want to congratulate you on that work.
Thank you, Commissioner. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Okay, with no further comments from the committee members, I'd like to open up the public hearing and receive any public testimony.
Great. Thank you, Chair Weigel. I understand that we have many people who are attendees right now. If any attendees would like to provide a comment specific to this public hearing, Clackamas Water Environment Services, you can do so now by utilizing the raise hand feature on Zoom. The raise hand button is on the Zoom bar. That's at the top or bottom, depending on your device. I do not see anybody on the phone. And let me double check the emails just in case we've gotten one. Seeing none there. Again, last chance. Any attendees? Raise hand. Seeing none, Chair.
Okay. The public hearing will be closed for testimony at this point. I would like to call for a I would like to call for a motion to approve the budget as stated.
Hi, yeah, this is Christopher. I move that the Budget Committee of Clackamas Water Environment Services approve the budget as recommended for the fiscal years 2020 to 2021 in the amount of $187,516,693 with appropriations of $114,010,217 as presented today.
Second.
Any discussion?
We're going to poll, remember.
We're going to poll. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We have a question from Mayor Axelrod.
Okay, go ahead.
Your mic.
Sorry. Gosh, you'd think I'd have this down by now. I'm on so many Zoom calls. I think I'm just kind of zoomed out. I just want to thank all the members that I'm working with on the committee for their diligence, and the advisory committee, and all staff at West that have been working on this. I just, there was a lot of uncertainty in some of the, as we integrated our utilities in the last few years and all. I think it's going really well. And a lot of people are, who are tracking this and seeing the outcome and what we're doing is, we're pretty pleased with that. So I just want to acknowledge them and give them a thumbs up, particularly under Greg's leadership. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been a team effort.
Question.
Go ahead, William.
Call the question.
Call the question?
Yeah, all those in favor?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna call for a vote. It has been moved and seconded that the budget be approved. All those in favor say aye.
No, Drenda's gonna poll you.
Oh,
Thank you. Mayor Axelrod,
Yes.
Commissioner Humberston,
Aye.
Mr. Bowker,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Mr. Gifford,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernard,
Aye.
Mr. Weigel,
aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much for your service. Enjoyed seeing you as far away as you are. And great job. It's a great organization. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Aye.